All the catastrophe justifies itself in the nobility of your striving. And that's what it means to be an individual. Thank you.
So recently, I've kind of been on a YouTube binging spree, but for good reason. I've coined the term positive procrastination. While I have been procrastinating from important tasks, I have been filling that time with constructive and motivational videos, so technically I have been still procrastinating. However, during this time, I've been very fortunate to come across a man by the name of Jordan Peterson. For those who are unfamiliar with that name, please search him up. He has over 100 hours of lecture content online for free. He's a Canadian clinical psychologist and author. He's written the book 12 Rules for Life. And over the last 10 years, he's gained quite a bit of international acclaim, and I think is well deserved. In his lectures, he speaks on a broad range of topics and he tackles very serious questions regarding religion, history, anthropology, philosophy, and even spirituality and metaphysics. So this guy is an intellectual powerhouse. I feel like this guy, he offers a genuine philosophy for living, one that I believe can guide a lot of people through the chaos that we are collectively going through. So stick around in this video and I will share with you guys some of his teachings that have been very impactful in my day-to-day life. Stick around.
But I'm too strong, I dust them off, I'm too strong, way too strong, I dust them off, yeah.
Being requires limitation and suffering. There's no escape from that. But there are modes of being that allow that to be perhaps even more than tolerable. Perhaps there are modes of being that allow that to be good. That's the question. Can we have the being that requires limitation and suffering and also simultaneously transcend that by our mode of being? And I believe that the biblical stories are one of the human imagination's best attempts to address and answer that question. That's what the entire story is about. So the first of it is the catastrophe of the collapse of self-consciousness and the entrance of humanity into history. And the rest of it is, okay, now we're in history. Now we know that we're going to die. We know about our mortality. We're conscious of our own being. Is there a mode of acting in the world that allows that to be justifiable, or maybe even more, that allows that to be triumphant? If you adopt a sufficiently profound mode of being, if you attempt to do that, then the mere act of lifting up that weight is enough to justify the fact that you're insufficient and mortal and bound by tragedy. And I believe that.
So we understand that suffering is a non-negotiable condition or precondition of existence. To live is to suffer. However, to live well and with purpose, with intention, to live and to bear your suffering and still, despite that, move in such a way that you improve not only your life but the life of others, that's how you live a meaningful and purposeful life. So a lot of the times we think of our suffering as the only suffering that's going on in the world. We're so selfish at times that we take our suffering to disproportionate amounts and say, because I'm dealing with this, oh, no one understands me. We use our suffering sometimes to justify our pathological behavior. And that's incorrect. I mean, I guess in the initial stages, of course, have some sympathy for yourself, but to sit and lurk in your own shit, essentially, to sit in your own suffering and to pretend like that's the only thing in the world that's worth caring about, it's like, no. It's amazing if you look at history and see how much our ancestors had to suffer. That kind of brings you to your senses to realize that perhaps you're not suffering as much as you think you are, and maybe you're making excuses for yourself. Like, I understand, I've gone through my share of suffering in this lifetime, but whenever I'm able to take myself out of being so obsessed with my problem, whenever I can take a step back and to have more of a bird's eye view upon my life and what I consider myself to be, I realize that most times when I'm suffering is because I actually identify with the small self that is suffering. Oftentimes it's by taking the heroic stance, even if it's you by yourself, or it feels that way anyways, but by taking the heroic stance to say, I'm going to move despite the suffering. I'm going to, bear my burdens, bear my cross, bear all of my inadequacies, and still move forward. I think that's truly noble and heroic, and something to feel proud about. There's a transcendental element to life. There's a transcendental element to being itself, that even though we are suffering, we can rise above it. We can't now equate life with suffering, because there is something beyond the suffering. There's a state of being higher than that. So there is something to aspire to. And as long as there's still hope, as long as there's still a better state of being, then we know that the suffering isn't the end point. Perhaps suffering is something that you have to go through, but we know that there's something beyond the suffering.
It isn't merely that your fate depends on whether or not you get your act together and to what degree you decide that you're going to live out your own genuine being. It isn't only your fate, it's the fate of everyone that you're networked with. And so, you think, well, there's 9 billion, 7 billion people in the world, and who are you? You're just one little dust mote among that 7 billion, and so it really doesn't matter what you do or don't do, but that's simply not the case. It's the wrong model, because you're at the center of a network. You're a node in a network. Of course, that's even more true now that we have social media. You'll know 1,000 people, at least, over the course of your life. And they'll know 1,000 people each, and that puts you one person away from 1 million, and 2 persons away from 1 billion. And so that's how you're connected. And the things you do, they're like dropping a stone in a pond. The ripples move outward, and they affect things in ways that you can't fully comprehend. And it means that the things that you do and that you don't do are far more important than you think. If you live a pathological life, you pathologize your society. And if enough people do that, then it's hell.
So another central theme that we've identified in a lot of his lectures is the idea of taking responsibility for your life. Taking responsibility for your actions, for your thoughts, for your feelings, for your emotions. Taking responsibility for how you act in this world. I think that's so crucial. We understand that the root is the self, and that by healing the self, you heal the world. That's an idea that's been espoused by many different critical thinkers. Krishnamurti, for one, who says that the consciousness of the world is the consciousness of the individual. The same contents in the individual's mind is the contents of consciousness itself, of the collective. And you get this idea of the collective consciousness that we're all connected to. So by the individual taking it upon himself to improve himself or herself, he is, by direct consequence, improving the world around him. So that's a compelling idea, and I think it takes a degree of maturity to understand that your actions influence the world. By the individual being able to make sense of that and then order himself, he is giving order to humanity. Think about how interconnected we are in this world. What I say, what I put out into the world will manifest in whichever way it does. It will have a knock-on effect. Me speaking to a viewer, you're going to watch this video, and whatever I am saying, if it's words of hatred or if it's words of love or it's something constructive, it will have a positive or negative effect on you, and you will carry that on into the next interaction that you have in your day. So we understand that then every human being is responsible for the state of the world. That's a critical level of understanding for human beings to evolve to. Thinking beyond the self, thinking cosmically now. So take responsibility for your actions, take responsibility for your thoughts, take responsibility for your modes of being that will have an effect first in yourself, and then you will see it in your family, your community, and that's how it works. At least that's how I understand it to be. Because I know that when I'm a better individual, it not only uplifts myself, it uplifts those around me.
And so you say in your life, well, something grips you and fills you with interest. And you think, well, should I do that? And the answer is, if not that, then something. There's redemptive mistakes. And a redemptive mistake would be a mistake that you make when you go out and try to do something. You know, you think, okay, I'm going to try to do this. When you're not good at it, you make a bunch of mistakes. It's like, what's the consequence if you pay attention? Is you're not quite so stupid anymore. That's the thing, is you've been informed by the results of your errors. As you stumble forward, you illuminate and inform yourself. And perhaps that's partly because the world is made of information, and if you encounter it and tangle with it, then it informs you, and then you become informed, and then you're information, and then you're ready. And often it's the case that when new parts of people manifest themselves and grip their interests, say, they do it very badly and shoddily. And so you stumble around like an idiot when you try to do something new. That's why the fool is the precursor to the savior from the symbolic perspectives, because you have to be a fool before you can be a master. And if you're not willing to be a fool, then you can't be a master. So imagine that you're trying to become enlightened, which might mean to turn all those parts of you on that could be turned on. You think, well, that's just a linear pathway uphill. You know, it's just from one success to another. No, it's not. It's like, here you are and you're not doing too badly, and the first step is a complete bloody catastrophe. It's worse. And then maybe you can pull yourself together and you hit a new plateau, and then that crumbles and shakes, and bang, it's worse again. And so, because part of the reason that people don't become enlightened is because it's punctuated by intermittent deserts, essentially, by intermittent catastrophes. And if you don't know that, well, then you're basically screwed, because you go ahead on your movement forward and you collapse, and you think, well, that didn't work, I collapsed. It's like, no, that's par for the course. It's not indication that you failed, it's just indication that it's really hard.
So as he says, the fool is the precursor to the master. So a master is not a person who hasn't failed. A master is someone who's failed so many times that he knows the ropes. You know, he knows the ins and outs of things. He's learnt about himself in a much deeper way. And he's integrated that knowledge, that past failure. He's integrated all of that into his new level of being. So he isn't afraid. He doesn't dodge failure. There is no shortcut. There is no diversion around that. Like, you have to go through it. You have to fail, and you have to fail miserably. And that's kind of like reassuring, because you realize, okay, everyone who's a success in life has had to fail. So understand that if you are failing right now, or if you have attempted something and it didn't go the way you planned it to, that's not a reason to stop. And that's not a reason for you to just throw your hands in the air and say, look, the world just has it out for me, no one's on my side. Like, no, that's part of the journey. Embrace it and move forward. Continue moving regardless. And surely enough, you will get to wherever you need to be.
Because you might ask yourself, like, if for 10 years, if you didn't avoid doing what you knew you needed to do, by your own definitions, right, within the value structure that you've created, to the degree that you've done that, what would you be like? Well, you know, there are remarkable people who come into the world from time to time, and there are people who do find out over decades-long periods what they could be like if they were who they were, if they spoke their being forward. And they get stronger and stronger and stronger, and we don't know the limits to that. We do not know the limits to that. And so you could say, well, in part, perhaps the reason that you're suffering unbearably can be left at your feet, because you're not everything you could be, and you know it.
So I'm about ready to wrap up this video. I hope that you guys did find it useful, and please do research Jordan Peterson. We are living in the most privileged era. Like, before, if you were dealing with your depression, boy, who could you turn to? But now we actually have a psychologist who is giving out his content for free, practically. You know, provided that you can afford internet. And if you are watching this video, then I'm sure I'm talking to someone who can afford it. So yeah, go watch this video. Give my video also a thumbs up, because that gives me positive feedback, so I know that I made a great video, or I made something that was actually helpful to someone. So thanks very much for watching this video, and until next time, Faculty X Training, and I'm out.